Android Wilson as Bob Iger's successor, the next CEO of Disney. Sure, why not? The last month or so in gaming has seen a lot happening. The Silent Hill 2 remake was actually a lot better than I ever anticipated. Apologies to Bloober, I didn't think that they had it in them. Red Dead Redemption finally made it to PC, a feat that felt like it would never happen. 343 is now Halo Studios and making the move to Unreal Engine. Don't think a rebrand fixes their issues, but it is something, I guess. Unknown 9 Awakening, the start of another what was envisioned massive franchise, flopped so badly to the point that nobody even knew or cared it existed. Swing and a miss. Bandai Namco, the publisher, seems to have invested quite a bit into it, and maybe not too surprising that they have now been hit with mass layoffs and games being cancelled. Ouch. Sony's 2024 resume continues to take a few massive hits, with Until Dawn's remake being met to universal disdain, with the overall sentiment being that the quote-unquote upgrade was not enough and didn't justify its steep price point. LEGO Horizon Adventures also released to a very soft reception, with many critics just not understanding who this was made for and why it was made. It's quite clear Sony is attempting to push Horizon as their big family-friendly franchise, but it just isn't clicking the way that I think they hoped for. Some of the reviews were absolutely brutal. PC Gamer gave it a 49 out of 100, saying insultingly short for its price, but that might be its one saving grace considering how derivative it feels. And Eurogamer gave it a 2 out of 5, saying too simple and childish for adults and too one-note to convert the kids. LEGO Horizon Adventures does little to recommend it to either existing Horizon fans or series newcomers. Sony's hopes of a big family-friendly franchise on the scale of, say, Microsoft's Minecraft or Nintendo Super Mario and Pokemon also lied very obviously with Concord, the hero shooter that was years too late to a crowded genre with downright horrific character design and a $400 million historic flop that only lasted 2 weeks and didn't even manage to hit 25,000 sales before everything was, refunded and shut down. All indication was that Firewalk was going to attempt to maybe make this game free to play in a comeback effort. That indication came from some work that was happening behind the scenes on Steam for the game, but no. Sony pulled the plug, the correct decision. Concord earned little interest when it had a free beta months before its actual official launch, and it was only getting worse. Investing more into this game would just be burning money, and it looks like Sony execs finally came to the realization with not just ending the game, but also the studio. A somewhat sad but obvious conclusion to one of gaming's biggest disasters ever. Now, in regards to one of gaming's biggest mysteries, Valve recently opened up in a new documentary alongside never-before-seen footage of Half-Life 2 Episode 3. Celebrating the 20th anniversary of Half-Life 2, Valve revealed the glimpses of guns and enemies of the cancelled Episode 3, including an ice ray gun that kind of is like a Silver Surfer mode. As PC Gamer explains, the gist is that what happened was that they didn't know how to push the game design forward enough to make it feel worthwhile to them. That ice gun was apparently not up to Valve's standards of innovation, nor were the blob enemies that use Portal tech. In the documentary, Half-Life 2 level designer David Riller says that they were experiencing element fatigue and needed to go bigger or do something else. And thus they did. They eventually switched their focus to Left 4 Dead and just never turned back. Gabe Newell addressed the failure, saying that they didn't just want to finish the story. My personal failure was being stumped. I couldn't figure out why doing Episode 3 was pushing anything forward. All of this Half-Life news does come hot on the heels of recent rumors and supposed leaks that again Half-Life 3 might be right around the corner. But you really never know with Valve. Every time over the last so many years people felt Half-Life 3 was indeed coming, it ended up being something completely different. Insomniac's Marvel's Wolverine is one of the few upcoming PlayStation first-party games that we know about and have footage of. It's also a game that has been devastated by a massive hack that leaked much of the game's content to the public earlier this year. The damage, though, does appear to be worsening, as the game's creative director Brian Horton has jumped ship mid-development and is now taking charge of Xbox's upcoming revival of Perfect Dark. Marcus Smith is the new creative director of Wolverine alongside Mike Daly as game director. The duo previously worked in similar roles on Insomniac's 2021 Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. One of the other PlayStation first-party studios many are eagerly awaiting to see what they've been up to the last few years is Naughty Dog. Recently, studio head and game director Neil Druckmann revealed the secrecy surrounding this upcoming project and why nothing has been shown is largely to do with Sony asserting control over marketing, but they did give him and his team full control over their next game. A game that has been in development since 2020 and is not believed to be The Last of Us Part 3, likely their project after the one that they're working on now. Rumors about this immediate upcoming game have been rampant and wild. All we do know is that it is likely a brand new IP, and some recent rumors have claimed that this new game will have a greater degree of player freedom, which could mean anything from open world to an RPG with choices and consequences. The Elder Scrolls Online is the latest game to be embroiled in the culture wars that has just taken over gaming the last year or so. And as we have this report coming from The Gamer, the Elder Scrolls Online narrative director responds to complaints surrounding a new non-binary companion being introduced. As it's noted here, Update 44 introduces the game's first non-binary companion, Tan Loren, voiced by R-Flag means Death Star Vico Ortiz, and many individuals obviously online have voiced complaints about this inclusion, saying that it's immersion breaking and that they supposedly don't fit into the world of Elder Scrolls. To that, narrative director Bill Slavicsek says they're wrong, and obviously The Gamer says that this representation is meaningful, but there is a vocal minority. They're declaring it a vocal minority that are just using this as an excuse to go after LGBT themes that are being introduced into games. But this developer, this narrative director, did say we have mixed marriages and gay and lesbian characters in abundance throughout the game Elder Scrolls Online. It just makes sense to us that all possibilities exist in Tamriel. We treat it as a real and living world. You just might not notice it because we don't shout it from the rooftops or put signs proclaiming it everywhere. And you know why? Because in Tamriel, this is just the way the world is. No character or the world blinks an eye or thinks there's anything unusual about meeting the baker and his husband, the serving woman and her wife, or to have Naira and Jakaran flirt with you regardless of your character's gender. And that's not even mentioning alchemy, the three living gods of the tribunal, or the Daedric princes who can appear as any gender they so desire. It's part of the world, and so it's no big deal. Starfield's $30 DLC Shattered Space has been met to, I wouldn't even call it mixed reviews. It's just downright probably one of the worst gaming experiences of 2024. A massive disappointment and a clear indication of concern with Bethesda Game Studios as a developer, as there seems to be a disconnect with what they're producing and what gamers actually want from them. And then there's also the quality issue with Shattered Space, which it just was not good at all. And obviously recently we discussed on the channel some of the reactions coming from one of the lead developers on Shattered Space, and it was just not satisfactory at all, as it seemed to be that Bethesda was doubling down and they seemed to love the expansion, even though it was being met to overwhelmingly negative reviews from users and quite a negative critic reception as well. Recently though, via Phil Spencer, the Xbox head, he gave some insight into how Todd Howard himself has reacted to this expansion, and if you're expecting that Bethesda was learning lessons or going to change or pivot or do anything different, no, it's not happening. As Games Radar reports, after Starfield Shattered Space's mixed reviews, Todd Howard wondered if Bethesda should have waited to put buggies out. Yes, Todd Howard thought those land vehicles that they put out, he thought that was a mistake. Maybe it held back the reception, I guess. As the report goes on to mention, as Microsoft Gaming lead Phil Spencer reveals in an interview with GameFile, Howard was worried the rover's earlier debut as part of a free update was a bad decision on his part. Todd and I were talking about Shattered Space, states Spencer. Starfield is a game I put a ton of hours into and really love, but they've had this thing where they've added features throughout the year and then they had an expansion. And then he goes on to say that Howard was questioning himself, saying, I think some of the feedback on the expansion is we wanted more features, which definitely was a critique, but it wasn't the main critique. And he's like, well, should we have waited to put buggies out? The Bethesda had figured keeping the vehicle for the DLC could have helped flesh it out more, but the problem is that the game wasn't built around the buggies, and to be fair, the buggies within Dazra, the main location of this expansion, really didn't do anything, and really they were buggy themselves. Spencer continued saying, and so I think you're trying to tune both development effort and the impact of the expansion, and I think there will always be a balance to managing the game month to month, but not every game will do expansions. And again, this is just another unsatisfactory response coming from Bethesda Game Studios in regards to this expansion, which in my mind was quite horrible. But it goes much further because Phil Spencer also talked about manipulative expansions and his dislike of it, which is just rather interesting after they sold a $30 DLC in the form of Shattered Space. Again, in another recent interview, the Microsoft Gaming CEO said that there's no top-down mandate on expansions and not every game will do expansions, which that's reasonable. It's really left to the creators regarding what plan they have for their stories. I think it's a great way for us to re-engage players who may be lapsed. I don't like expansions that are manipulative. I want it to have a unique point of view. I don't want it to be like the third level that you cut before you launched. So like Starfield, because House of Varun quite literally feels like it was cut from the base game experience and then sold in a $30 expansion, which really didn't get much. It just didn't stand out on its own at all, and it didn't feel like it was worth that $30. Even from those who actually, the minority that did enjoy Shattered Space, a lot of them come to the agreement that probably should have been sold for about 15 to 20 bucks. It would have made a lot more sense, but $30, that's just insane, especially with the experiences on the market with the expansions that do so much more, from Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree to The Witcher 3 expansions, or even last year's Phantom Liberty from Cyberpunk 2077, which totally transformed the game in a way that I think a lot of people wanted to see with Starfield, but it never happened, and it doesn't seem like it will ever happen. Now, following the massive success of the Fallout TV show earlier this year, Xbox boss Phil Spencer also explained why not having a new Fallout game ready for the Fallout TV show's launch actually worked out for the best. And again, in another recent interview, this time with Inverse, he said, "We didn't have a new game lined up for the launch. I actually think that gave us some creative liberty that we wouldn't have, and if we tried to coordinate production of two very different creative processes to land at the same time," which I feel like is just copium with the fact that they don't have any new Fallout experiences on the way. It's just Fallout 76, and based on Fallout Day, which happened just recently, we're going to talk about that in a separate video in the future very soon, it literally is just Fallout 76 and the TV show for the foreseeable future. Obviously, there's been some hope that a Fallout 3 or New Vegas remaster may be on the way, but there's been zero indication of that from Bethesda Game Studios the last couple of years. And I think this is just an example of Phil Spencer playing the PR game, because yes, it is a missed opportunity to not capitalize with a new project. Obviously, Fallout 4 and 76 have enjoyed some greater success because of the TV show, but a new experience, a new game, a remaster, something would have done wonders for this company this year. Now, in other news regarding Bethesda, we've also seen that the company is going on strike, or a certain amount of employees. As The Verge says, workers at Bethesda parent company strike over remote work policies. We've been seeing this across the industry the last number of months. It isn't just Bethesda. We also saw this at Ubisoft. A lot of employees at these companies, especially during the COVID pandemic, left the main cities that they were working at with these studios, which tend to be very expensive, and they lived on the outskirts, probably for lower, rent and stuff. And now things are changing, and now a lot of these studios like Ubisoft, like Bethesda, Microsoft, they're requiring employees to come back into the offices, but again, their wages just don't keep up with the cities, with what's required for rent and everything. So a lot of the employees are very upset with that, especially when you have QA employees in this instance, which they're usually paid like just above minimum wage at a lot of these places. So it's not surprising that many of these employees are voicing their displeasure with how these companies are changing things back to how they used to be. Today we are on strike. ZeniMax Workers United posted on X, "We are not afraid to do what's necessary to make sure that Microsoft meets us at the bargaining table over key issues like remote work options and outsourcing." ZeniMax Workers United is made up of approximately 300 quality assurance testers. When the union was formally recognized in January 2023, it became parent company Microsoft's first union, and at the time was the largest video game union in the United States. That was obviously surpassed just a number of months later, with 600 members of Activision Quality Assurance United being formed as well under Microsoft's umbrella. Remote work policies seem to be a major sticking point for Microsoft's video game unions right now, and that is why they are on strike and have been on strike. A couple of videos ago, we talked about how Ubisoft had a new NFT game releasing. Yes, that fad, they waited way too long to jump on it, and they're trying to capitalize on something that there's just no interest in it. And very much it has been a dumpster fire. It flares up as a matchmaking bug, leaves every player connecting and losing to the same confused, unkillable guy, this is just going as expected. And to make matters worse, they released its first crypto game with one NFT that currently costs $63,000, which maybe crypto bros will buy stuff like that, but we saw with the Ubisoft Quartz program with, I think it was Tom Clancy's Breakpoint, there was just no interest in that, and I imagine this is probably going to die out in the coming weeks and months. But we've also seen that Ubisoft was sued by the Crew players over the server shutdown. This was a major story the last number of months, but 2 players of the online racing game The Crew are suing Ubisoft, the game's developer and publisher, over its shuttering of the game's servers, which effectively removed all access to the title. The suit goes on to claim that Ubisoft duped players by leading them to believe they were buying a game rather than renting a license to it, and that portions of the game would remain available offline in perpetuity. But the problem is, these licenses, it's just not a new thing. This is what the gaming industry gets away with its EULAs, and I think a lot of players not understanding that they don't actually own games. I mean, physical copies, that's a different story, I think, but with digital copies, these companies very much tried it, I should say, that they can just shut everything down all at once and there's nothing that players can do. And ultimately, Richard Hogue, a business lawyer who's given his input on a lot of video game stories over the last number of years, pretty much his only response to this story was, lawyers are the only winners here. Now, Ubisoft has been dealing with the reality of dumpster fire after dumpster fire, one of the recent ones being Star Wars Outlaws, which only sold about 1 million copies, which, I just, every time I bring that up, it's just truly insane to think that a open world Star Wars game didn't sell at all. But Ubisoft is obviously trying to turn this around. They recently have a new creative director who promised big changes after the disappointing sales. They released its first developer update a couple of weeks ago for Star Wars Outlaws, with new creative director Drew Reckner promising big changes after the open world adventure disappointed. Reckner said in the update that Ubisoft has been gathering and actioning player feedback since launch and has identified key areas where it can elevate the game experience to better meet player expectations. And then he went on to outline a couple of points that he wants to tackle with the first update, which is going to be coming with the Steam release on November 21st. The first key area to improve in the game is combat, where we see a real opportunity to add more depth and excitement to the experience, further rewarding your tactics and precision. Our second key area is stealth, which is not only about improving the readability and consistency of enemy detection, but also providing choice in how you want to approach each encounter. And finally, our third area of focus is centered around the character controls, which means improving the reliability of cover, increasing the responsiveness of climbing and crouching, and generally improving the consistency of the controls overall. But the big problem I have with this is just that it's too little too late. This is not a live service. A lot of players who have played this have moved on, and I guess they're hoping that there will be an abundance of new players when it comes to Steam, but I have my doubts. Now, Ubisoft is also dealing with the fact that another massive project that has been in development for years is apparently being restarted. Not just Skull and Bones, not just Prince of Persia, not Beyond Good and Evil 2, but Project U is back to the drawing board after 5 years of development, which I completely forgot about this one. Ubisoft has so many games that have been in development hell for years, it's hard to keep up with all of this, but as noted by Insider Gaming, Project U was officially announced in September 2022 as a revolutionary new kind of session-based cooperative shooter, but after over 2 years since its announcement, nothing publicly about the game has been announced. That's because Project U, internally codenamed Pathfinder, quietly returned to the drawing board in spring 2024 following issues surrounding the game's replayability. Its premise is that Earth has been invaded by machines that want to mechanize all life. The game would see 10 teams of 4 battle it out in PvE combat against progressively more difficult enemies as they progress through the map zones, which could have thousands of enemy AI robots on the map at any given time. Eventually, players would enter the final zone in the middle of the map where they needed to defeat the boss, despite initially receiving generally positive feedback. Again, the main issue, replayability, came up, and sources say it was a constant issue for the developers and would see the project's budget balloon due to continuous rework. So in March 2024, Ubisoft Annecy announced that Project U development would cease immediately, and 2 of the game directors immediately left along with many of the other developers that were a part of the project. But now, on the hot heels of Helldivers 2 popping off, which has sold to date about 15 million units, as such, it's said that Ubisoft still believes this project and has moved Project U back into incubation with a new producer and a small team to explore new ideas, which, yeah, Ubisoft just never learns. Now, another massive controversy that Ubisoft continues to face, and it will continue to face them up until the game's release, Assassin's Creed Shadows has been another game right there in the culture wars. And finally, it does appear that Ubisoft has had enough as they went on the attack in regards to some of the outrage surrounding this game. As reported on by Eurogamer, head of the franchise Mark Alexis Cote had to say this in regards to the franchise. He first talked about how the franchise has changed. With the death at the end of Assassin's Creed 3 with Desmond, we faced a creative crossroads. As we move forward, our goal is to put history back at the center of the player experience. The modern day narrative will serve to enhance rather than overshadow the historical journey. By drawing meaningful contrast between past and present, we aim to restore the balance that was once the hallmark of the franchise, although modern day it sucked for a very long time, and I have my doubts about that. Cote speaking at a BAFTA event in London, saying, in Assassin's Creed Shadows, we highlight figures both fictional like Neo, a Japanese woman warrior, and historical like Yasuke, the African-born samurai. While the inclusion of a black samurai in feudal Japan has sparked questions and even controversy, Neo as a fictional character has also faced scrutiny for her gender. But just as Yasuke's presence in Japan history is fact, so too are the stories of women who defied societal expectations and took arms in times of conflict. So while both Neo and Yasuke's stories are works of historical fiction, they reflect the collision of different worlds, cultures, and roles, and their inclusion is precisely the kind of narrative that Assassin's Creed seeks to tell, one that reflects the complexity and interconnectedness of our shared history. And this is where Cote goes on the attack. He says, today, we all, however, face the added challenges of distinguishing between genuine feedback and attacks driven by intolerance. The current climate is tough. On our creative teams, they face lies, half-truths, and personal attacks online. When the work they pour their hearts into is twisted into a symbol of division, it's not just disheartening, it can be devastating. What keeps me going is the resilience born out of conviction, and I see in our teams every day. I am especially proud of the Shadows team for staying true to their creative vision and the core tenets of Assassin's Creed. So yeah, right now Assassin's Creed Shadows is set to launch in February 2024. They will be competing against a stacked month of releases, one of which is Kingdom Come 2 Deliverance. And we actually saw one of the lead developers on the project, Daniel Vavra, responding to this, saying, Kingdom Come 2 will be released just a few days before new Assassin's Creed. Makes me a little bit nervous, but it will be interesting to see. If a smaller company with hardcore old school RPG could compete with a corporate product for modern audiences, damn the shade. What do you think? Also, no de novo. And he continued saying, by the way, I'm a big fan of Assassin's Creed series, but they kind of lost me with nonsensical Valhalla since my god rides 8-legged horses in the skies. Origins was the last one I really enjoyed and taught my daughter about Egypt through it. And in my opinion, I think Origins was fantastic, and the franchise has fallen on hard times the last couple of years, especially in regards to Valhalla, which it was a mess in many regards. If you've never seen my review on it, I highly recommend. The GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition was an absolute disaster, arguably worse than Cyberpunk 2077. It was a remaster project that was totally disrespectful to classic games, and it was made worse by the fact that Rockstar Games delisted the classic games in the lead up to this definitive edition, and they also took down popular mods of these classic games. It was a total slap in the face to fans, and a lot of people were already upset with this definitive edition even before it released, and then what we got was, it was honestly astonishing. And it was so bad that the outside studio that Rockstar Games brought in, Grove Street Games, they screwed up so badly that they left in original source code for this project in which data miners found it, and it just featured so much stuff that was not meant for players to see. But again, Rockstar Games, obviously, they deserve all the blame because they were overseeing this project, and they obviously didn't care about the standards, because if they had, this would have never released how it did. And again, this project was so mishandled that we saw developer comments left in which it appeared to be that Grove Street developers were arguing with Rockstar Games developers with certain aspects of the game. It was just an absolute mess, an absolute travesty. And ultimately, Grove Street Games' reaction, well, this is the company's CEO at the time saying, "It's so fun to see players out there really enjoying what we put together for them. I'm honestly enjoying this unparalleled level of scrutiny on our studio. Today we are celebrating our monumental project launch while we work on updates," which that was his reaction to an absolute disaster. Rockstar Games obviously handled things a little bit differently. They apologized for the definitive edition, they promised improvements, and they also said it was unexpected issues, which I think a lot of us looked at that at the time and just said that that's just not possible. They knew these problems, they just didn't care. Again, this was not something that was developed in-house by Rockstar Games. They hired outside studios to work on on this, specifically Grove Street Games, which had a history of god-awful remasters and ports of Rockstar projects back in the day, mobile ports, I believe, of the GTA trilogy, and they did the same quality here, and it ended up being an absolute disaster, and it has cost the company in terms of player trust, and it's just one of those things that has made people extremely worried about future Rockstar games, even though that they didn't technically develop this remaster. Regardless though, last year we did see a number of improvements come to the mobile versions, specifically Netflix's GTA trilogy ports. They featured a ton of things that were not in the console and PC ports at the time. These were improvements that I talked about in a separate video, and they were very notable. They added a lot of things that should have been there day one. Now though, a year later, and 3 years I believe since the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition originally went live, they have made a ton of new improvements now for all versions of the game. As here written by Videotech UK, Ben, he is one of the big sources on Rockstar Games. He put together patch notes of all of the improvements, and as you can see here, it is just extensive. I'm not going to go over every single one here, but him and the community have done a great job putting together just so much here. And as you can see, he pointed out some of the improvements, the original version versus now, the classic lighting. That's the big thing a lot of people are pointing out. The classic vibe that was missing is finally back. I just don't know how you fumbled this so badly at the time, but it's awesome to see, even though it took way too long. And there's even more. The GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition Rain, the original, remember that it's almost unplayable with how bad the rain was, and now here it is today. Just great improvements overall. Here's the classic lighting of San Andreas versus what it used to be, and then there's more. Claude in GTA San Andreas is now using the GTA 3 model of him. Just great improvements all across the board. Zach Cox TV pointing out again, they fixed the hangar right here. And Besk Infinity, super fan of the channel and another one of those big Rockstar fan accounts, pointed out here, GTA DE patch fixed neon lights around Vice City, giving them the OG proper color, which again, it's just crazy that none of this was there day one. It's just truly insane that Rockstar Games let it release how it did. And yeah, there's some other things that are brought up here. The gas station burger shot signs are now functioning in GTA San Andreas, which they weren't originally. That was another. There was just so many different problems with this. It looked like they used AI upscaling for a number of parts of this remaster, and there just was no quality control at all for this. But we have seen that Rockstar Games did make one other notable change with these new improvements that have been added. They removed Grove Street Games from the splash screen at the beginning of the Trilogy Definitive Edition. And furthermore, you can tell that Grove Street Games is not happy with this because they seemingly unfollowed Rockstar Games on social media after its new update removes its name from the menu screens. And again, Grove Street Games was the main developer on this project in 2021, and it is worth noting that Rockstar Games still isn't the main developer on this GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. They actually brought in Video Game Deluxe, which was responsible for the recent Red Dead Redemption port, and they were mostly behind this as far as I understand. But Grove Street Games, very unhappy about all of this, and the company's CEO took to his Twitter account bashing Rockstar Games. He said, speaking entire hypothetically, he's not, it's a dick move to remove primary developers from credits in an update, especially when an update includes hundreds of fixes that were provided by those developers that stayed out of players' hands for years. So what Grove Street's CEO is saying here is that a lot of the improvements that have now made it to the game, that was actually work that they did. And many individuals, including many GTA fan accounts, have also pointed out that they weren't entirely removed from the credits, they were just removed from the splash screen, as they still are in the game's credits, as pointed out here by GTA Net. Rumors being circulated by the community and even some news websites about Grove Street having been removed from the GTA trilogy entirely are unfounded. Both Grove Street Games and Video Game Deluxe are in the final credits, only the initial splash screen was removed. And you know why Rockstar Games did that? Because Grove Street ruined their reputation. They harmed it, and Rockstar Games has shown many times over the years they are a very vindictive company, and this is another example of it. But right now, Rockstar Games' focus is not on the GTA trilogy, or even the Red Dead Redemption PC port, or GTA Online. It is Grand Theft Auto 6, their next massive experience that was last year announced with a teaser trailer, and a year later, we're still awaiting any official news from them. Hopefully, maybe they're just waiting for this anniversary to give us our second trailer. Hopefully something before the year ends. Anyway, there's a lot of different things going on in the video game world. What do you make of it all? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.